people who have lost something, or who have lost someone dear to them, and specifically those who have lost their children. But it's a message to all those who have undergone the experience of loss. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what means, and we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and a loss of wealth and lives and fruits. But give good tidings, give glad tidings to the patient. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Well, this is a very powerful statement. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, so the ayah before is talking about that to give glad tidings to a particular group of people, and that particular group are as-sabirin. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the next ayah goes and describes who is this group, who are as-sabirin. And He describes them as those people who, when a calamity or a disaster strikes them, they reply, they react, or they respond with this statement, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Now I want to just take a second to talk about this statement, because the statement is very profound. Literally the statement means that indeed, inna lillahi, indeed we belong to Allah, wa inna ilayhi raji'un, and indeed to Allah we will return. The reason why this statement is so powerful is because it's not just a statement, it's not just something that we say, but it's something that if we really truly understand, it allows us to cope with loss. If we understand that everything that we have, everything that we're given, every gift that we have, whether it's our children or our spouses or our parents or even our own selves, even our health, our youth, our beauty, everything that we have, it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a gift from Him, and it's something that does not belong to me. Now if you think about an example where suppose I borrow my friend's car, and suppose that my friend is very generous, and so my friend allows me to keep this car for a really long time. So I get to keep this car for years, and I drive it, and it helps me get to where I need to be. And then a point comes when my friend wants their car back. So my friend will come to me and ask for the car back. Now at this point, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to be upset at my friend or to be angry that my friend is asking for the car back, because I know that that car never belonged to me, that car always belonged to that person. And so when that person comes and asks for it back, I remember that it always belonged to them to begin with, and they were just letting me borrow it. And so this concept is very powerful. In everything that we have, it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's Allah who's allowing us to borrow it. And our children are the same, our family members are the same. They all belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's out of Allah's mercy that He allows us to have these things for a while, for an appointed term. And everything in this life has an appointed term, and everything in this life will come to an end. And in the end, what will matter is how we respond once those things do come to an end. And subhanAllah, the very next ayah talks about what type of fruit, what type of reward is given for those who have this response of inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, the first part of which is realizing that we belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything will return to Him. And so when something is taken, this is the response. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says that those people, He then describes what is the reward for those people. And He says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. So there's three amazing things that come as a result of having this type of response, as I mentioned in this ayah. First, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those are the ones upon whom are blessings from their Lord. So salawat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless those people. Next, He says, wa rahmah, and He will give His mercy. He will bestow His mercy on those people. And it is those who will be rightly guided. So guidance, hidayah. So I mean, if you can think about these things, these are things that cannot be quantified. These are like priceless things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that for those who respond when calamity strikes with the attitude of inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un and sabr, that those people will have these three amazing things. They will have the mercy, they will have the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and guidance itself, that those people will be those who are guided. And subhanAllah, there is nothing in the entire world that could be greater than those things. And those are things that we would give everything between the heavens and the earth to have. And those are the things that are promised for the people who respond with inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, it was narrated by Salama about this concept of inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. She said that she heard the Prophet ﷺ say that if a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is afflicted with any misfortune and then says this statement, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, Allahumma ajirni fi musibati wa akhlif li khayran minha. So what this means is, first you say the statement, the first part of the statement is, indeed we belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to Him we will return. And then you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you from the calamity and to bestow upon you what is better than it. And so the Prophet ﷺ says that if you say this statement, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will replace whatever was taken from you with something better. So again, this statement, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, Allahumma ajirni fi musibati wa akhlif li khayran minha. So this statement, if you say this statement in the time of calamity or loss, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will replace what you had with something better. And what happened with Salima is that her husband died. And so she said this statement after his death, and indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaced her husband with something better, and she ended up marrying the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, obviously there couldn't have been a better man that she could have married. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also tells us that when we have this loss, so if you think about the situation of losing a loved one, your child, your spouse, a family member, if we have this proper response, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises to replace it with something better. And if you think about what could be better, I mean, we love our children and we love, these family members. We can't really imagine something being better. No money could ever pay for, could ever make up for it, right? No amount of things could ever make up for that loss. But look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His messengers say you get that's better. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger says, if any member of my people has 2 children who die before him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause him to enter paradise on their account. And then Aisha asked him, well, what if it's just 1 child? And he said it's the same. So look at what is better. The thing that is offered for this person is Jannah. So as a result, and there's many ahadith that say this, as a result of that loss, that person who lost their child will be given Jannah. Now I want to just reflect about Jannah for a second. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He describes Jannah in the Quran, He says that it's khayrun wa abqa. That Jannah is khayrun, which means it's better in quality. And abqa meaning that it's longer lasting. So Jannah is better in quality, it's also better in quantity. So Jannah is a place that is better, that is khayrun, meaning that I may be with my child in this life, but I still have to deal with my child being sick, my child getting hurt, my child, these are inevitable, that no matter what I try to do to protect my child, I cannot, I can never protect my child from tears, ever crying or ever feeling pain. It's impossible. It's just, it is a natural part of this life. Even, when I'm trying to protect my child, I still have to give my child shots. I have to, the child, there's no way for them never to feel pain. And yet in Jannah, look at this better life. In Jannah, you get to be with your child, but there's no pain. There's no pain for your child, there's no pain for you. And then abqa, it's longer lasting. There's no end. You never have to lose your child again. You never have to be separated from your child again, because it's Jannah. So it's what is better. So as a result of this thing being taken from you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will replace it, inshallah, with Jannah, which is better. Now, one of the ahadith which talk about this, it's actually one of the most moving ahadith to me personally, so I'll do my best to read it without getting emotional. But the Prophet ﷺ said that when a child of a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala passes away, Allah says to the angels, "Did you take the soul of my servant's child?" They say, "Yes." He, Azza wa Jal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, "Did you take away the apple of my servant's eye?" And they say, "Yes." And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "What did my servant say at this?" And they say, "He praised you and said, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Verily we belong to Allah and to Him shall we return." At this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Build for my servant a mansion in paradise and call it Baytul Hamd, the house of praise." So look at, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows what we go through when we feel that loss. He knows what we are going through when we feel that pain. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as a result of that, He will, when we're patient, He will replace it with a mansion in Jannah. He will replace it with a home in Jannah with your child. And what's really beautiful is that we're also told in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that when a child dies young, that child waits outside on the Day of Judgment, that in the hereafter, that child waits outside of the gates of Jannah for his or her parents, and doesn't want to enter Jannah without his or her parents. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also, this is something I just want to, inshallah, convey to you, and because I think one of the problems is sometimes we think that having sabr and being patient with loss means that we're not allowed to feel sadness or we're not allowed to cry, and this is actually not true. Sabr, crying does not necessarily negate sabr, and we know this because, for example, the Prophet ﷺ, when his grandson was dying, he actually started crying, and one of his companions asked him, what is this? He was kind of taken aback that the Prophet ﷺ was crying. And the Prophet ﷺ replied, "It is mercy which Allah has lodged in the hearts of His slaves, and Allah is merciful only to those of His slaves who are merciful to others." So the tears themselves is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Feeling that and crying does not mean that you are not patient. So the tears themselves are not necessarily indicative of a lack of sabr, but rather even that those tears and that brokenness can actually be a means to bring you near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and humble you and make your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stronger. Because we find that it's during our times of need and our times of hardship that a lot of times we become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We make dua with all of our heart. We're able to reach a state of humility with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tadarra with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where we really, really realize our need for Allah, and through that we're actually strengthening our relationship with Him. So we should actually be able to use those tears and that brokenness, if it's addressed towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's okay to complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is not the same as complaining about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that even the prophets did, that were the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, after Ta'if, he said that he complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, even Ayyub alayhi salam, who was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referred to him as being, he referred to him as being patient, and yet he also complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Anni massani ad-durr wa anta arhamur rahimin." That Allah, that this hardship had struck him, and he complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we should be able to turn to Allah and cry to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for patience, sabr, for to withstand these losses, and to be able to be given what is better, and inshallah be reunited with whoever it is that we have lost in Jannah, inshallah. قولي قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم إنه غفور رحيم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.